Just to kick off, growing up for you, when and how did you discover the blues?
Oh man, I was like a little teddy boy between the age of 8 and 13, real 50s throwback. And I guess I mean, listening to early Elvis, the big boy crud up, the Big Bill Broonzy stuff. By the time I was 12, I was really keen to discover a bit more about how Elvis got all this influence out of the blues, and find out some more about the blues. My old man took me to a record store for my 12th birthday to go and pick out a record. And I didn't know anything about the blues, and just picked out an album which had a big black guy on the cover playing a big fat Gibson 355. And to my joy, it turned out to be a Freddie King album, which was my first introduction to the blues, really. By the third song, I was kind of, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a doctor up until then. And yeah, I mean, straight away I saved up and bought a guitar and was in my first band within a few weeks.
Okay. What was your first guitar?
It was a cheap little Les Paul copy. I can't even remember the make. Basically, it was affordable, and it was black, and it looked kind of similar to the 355 that Freddie King was playing on that album.
Did you go through any formal guitar training at all, or were you pretty much self-taught?
Nah, pretty much self-taught. I had like one lesson from a guitar player who lived just down the road from where my folks lived as a kid, who kind of taught me how to push myself through it. I really discovered the best way of learning was just going out and seeing good music on a regular basis and jamming with people regularly. I was lucky enough to spend a lot of time in the States, mainly around the Austin area when Austin was buzzing when I was a kid. So I had cats like Jimmy Vaughan backstage at Antone's, like slapping me around the head and showing me how Lightning Hopkins would have played a riff as opposed to Eric Clapton and stuff like that. So really just a bit of advice from older guys who were already doing it as a kid, and just listening as much as possible. That's the best way you can learn.
Now, aside from that Freddie King album, were your parents a great influence on you musically? They're from different backgrounds, aren't they?
Oh, yeah, I mean, not really a huge musical influence, but my mum was a big jazz fan. I mean, I was, like I say, age 8, I was wanting to go and see gigs from the rock and rollers that I wanted to go and see, and because I was so little, she had to come and accompany me to the shows, so we went to see, like, Jerry Lee Lewis and Fats Domino and Bill Haley and a bunch of guys when I was that age. But then she was also taking me to jazz clubs and slipping me into clubs and taking me to shows to see all kinds of stuff, from Joe Pass to... I guess the first show she really took me to was Oscar Peterson and Ella Fitzgerald with Joe Pass on guitar and Ray Brown on bass, which was kind of a good introduction to jazz.
Not bad at all, yeah.
But yeah, I was never hugely influenced, I guess, or helped by my parents. I guess the guitar was always the thing that got me into trouble as a kid.
Now you cut your teeth on live performing around the bars and clubs in Texas. Was that a competitive scene there?
Yeah, and it still is. That's actually the great thing about the US in comparison to the UK, is that it's still highly competitive, which essentially means there's like an ethos that if you're at a jam session, or if someone invites you to come and sit in with them, you don't touch a stage or grace a stage unless you can really hold your own, because basically you won't make it out the club alive. Whereas I guess in the UK and Europe, the problem's been this karaoke mentality that everyone who picks up an instrument wants to get up on stage and do something, regardless of whether it's any good or not, you know. And that doesn't create benchmarks for kids like I was growing up, wanting to capably see, you know, what the benchmark is that you're supposed to be trying to achieve in the first place as a player.
So you regard that time as a pretty important time in terms of your grounding as a musician?
Oh, absolutely, because it kind of differentiates the men from the boys. You realise that there's a huge difference between what it takes to try and learn to be good or really great at something, and there's such a huge void in between. And you know, you need a competitive environment around you to do that. You've always got to be looking over your shoulder.
Now, you received a lot of acclaim for your first album and awards as well. Did that put any pressure on you to live up to a reputation of sorts?
Not really, because I guess I was kind of young, frivolous, and stupid. So I didn't really notice much of that stuff that was going on around me. I kind of, cockily assumed that that's the way it's supposed to be when you embark on a musical career. and I assumed that stuff would always work out right, which of course time then later on teaches you isn't necessarily the case. But it didn't really put a bunch of pressure on me. I guess I was just intent on wanting to play as much as possible and have a good time. In many respects, looking back, I'm kind of, I can't stand to listen to that first album now.
Really?
Although I thought it was amazing when I did it. It's kind of, it was the learning how to, getting away from the frivolous and learning to really listen more objectively to yourself. Because when you're a kid, you spend all the time listening to what you think is good about yourself. I guess you do this with your personality too. And I guess, you can't really develop or change or really improve at anything or understand it fully if you're doing that. You have to switch off the bit of you that knows what's good and start switching on to what's bad and then changing it.
You think you'd still feel that way about the first album if there wasn't such a long gap between the first and the second?
I do. It's simply in that I've grown so much since then. I was a late developer when it came down to maturing, I guess, as an individual in every respect. And music's such an important, the intrinsic most important thing in my life. I've learned and figured out so much more, and my ears can hear so much more now than they did then. There's a bunch of stuff I'd have changed, but looking back if I could, but there's very few musicians I know who've been doing this a while who don't feel exactly the same about stuff they used to do. If you're always moving and you're always evolving, 9 times out of 10, everything you listen to that you've done just a few months previously, you wish you could change.
Now, you've been called upon over the years to provide backup for some great touring acts that have come your way. Who are some of the most memorable for you?
I guess, rather than like the big tours, because I've done a lot of session stuff working with other artists as well, like Van Morrison and various people. To be honest, it's probably the stuff that your die-hard blues fans would really appreciate more than your average music fan. Like putting together backing bands for visiting American artists who were coming over to Europe on small budget. And stuff like that for guys like Hubert Sumlin. I suppose Hubert Sumlin was like a real important one. People who at the end of the day influence my playing to a huge degree, regardless of whether the majority of the blues audiences really know who these people are and what they've achieved and what they've done. Because there's always the commercially successful people who appear in people's minds. I guess stuff like that, really. I'd say Hubert Sumlin was probably my most important.
How great a learning experience are situations like that to be able to observe up close, these guys as band leaders?
Well, they're great because, if you're going to be really honest with yourself, you learn a lot by watching what people are doing right and also what they're doing wrong. Just because someone's amazing and has created a legacy doesn't necessarily mean they do everything the right kind of way. And it's just that being totally objective to what's going on around you and just watching and listening and not thinking that you've always got the answers, which I guess is what kids always are pre-programmed to do, And I suppose the great thing is that people like Hubert, were working with me at a time of their life when they're pretty old and they're pretty wise and they've experienced a fair amount. And very few kids can maintain that cocky character or personality around people like that. It kind of forces you just to shut up and learn a bit of wisdom.
Now, reading a bit of history about yourself on your website, they make mention of some jam sessions at a venue called the Weavers. Can you tell us a little bit about that? It sounds like something special.
I guess everywhere I've ever lived, and I've moved around like a gypsy most of my life. Everywhere I've lived, I've always felt the need or the compulsion to get something going in my community, be it from running a jam session or promoting a show once in a while, bringing some outside music into the area or stuff like that. I started this jam at the Weavers, which was predominantly known as a country and western venue, but it was literally just a few feet over the road from the apartment I was living in. And I started it with my good friend Earl Green, who's I guess one of the foremost British blues singers on the circuit, has been for many years. And I guess, the great thing about the Weavers was, on one side, it gave me the reputation as being a total bastard, because you can't run a high-quality jam session without breaking a few eggs and damaging a few egos, because quality control's got to be so high. but at the same time it created an environment where some of the best musicians in London and the best touring musicians from the States would start coming down, and that in turn, of course, meant that word of mouth, audiences realised what was going on, and pretty soon we had queues around the corner before each evening. We had everyone from Bill Wyman, Mark Knopfler, Paul Jones from the blues band, all kinds of cats all turning up ad hoc, you'd never know when, sitting in. And my quality control theory was that if I just kept the bad or the average or the musicians who were learning, it was still a beginning development learning phase away from the stage. That way, essentially, we could create a forum where if you were a great musician, you knew that no matter how far you travelled or what time you turned up, you were always going to be getting up with other great musicians and meeting other people of your calibre. And unfortunately, like I say, locally, the thing became successful, but most of the local musicians hated me pretty much after that.
There was quite a legal wrangle with your record company after the first album. What exactly were the circumstances there?
It's not something I really like to reminisce too much about. I had just big problems with my then management and a deal that they tied me into. And as I wanted to get out of the management commitment, I was still stuck within the deal that he'd set up on my behalf. I'd essentially, by that stage, started a rock band with who was then one of my best friends, this great singer-guitarist called Ian Siegel from the UK. We'd signed a deal with the Virgin subsidiary and actually an Australian publishing company as well, AC/DC's publishers, J. Alberts, who set up offices in London. And Ian and I fell out, and he ran off with my manager to go solo, and it was just like a whole legal overspill from that kind of ate into everything that I wanted to do for the next couple of years.
So was that the main reason, because of the gap? Was that the main reason for the gap between the albums?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't really go straight back into doing anything straight under my own name. Financially, I'd lost a lot of money as well in terms of the deal. I mean, there was the best part of £200,000 worth of publishing that disappeared, publishing advances. So I kind of ran away from the hills. I ran away to the hills, I guess. I ran out of London and concentrated really on being a session player and backing people up and being a sideman for a bit of time. And also being that age, I wanted to experience other sides of the music business and other kinds of music and see how I coped within them, So it was the main reason, and then I basically kind of enjoyed the whole session thing. But I mean, after a while, I had to come back to the blues because every bluesman knows, I mean, you can't escape it.
Did it make you a little extra cautious next time around looking for a deal?
Oh yeah. No, I mean, what was great was it gave me a good instinct for delegation. If you're going to give someone responsibility and an extreme license over your career, I mean, once again, when you're young and frivolous and you're naive, you don't really realise what the repercussions of stuff like that are if you get it wrong. So your instinct starts to learn how to get it right, and hopefully, touch wood, things are working out pretty well now. I've got a European manager and a US manager who govern both sides of the world separately.
Were you still doing a lot of writing in that time?
Yeah, that's the one thing that's never stopped, really. I mean, I guess I was lucky to just accidentally started songwriting the moment I started playing the guitar as a kid, and I kind of never stopped. So that's always been an outlet that I've always needed to do. And with the depression of being away from the blues for so long, and I started hankering after it and missing the whole scene, I suddenly found that real quickly I'd had an album's worth of material or more sitting around. And it kind of gave me the impetus to go back into the studio and go back to what I enjoyed doing the most,
So after all that session work, it must have been a great feeling to get back in there and record something for yourself again.
It was wonderful. I mean, the best part as well was coming out and doing some preliminary shows and seeing that all that while later the audience really hadn't changed and they were still there. And I didn't have too many problems in building up crowds again.
Yeah, there was quite an impressive guest list on that album. What criteria did you use selecting players to appear on that record?
That was kind of a strange one because it ended up being a virtual guest album and was never supposed to be originally. I guess because I've been through a real rough ride and emotionally that period of years away from the scene was really tough on me. I guess I kind of saw the album as being a tribute to a lot of the friends who, regardless, had stuck by me, and to people that I looked up to and still felt hugely inspired by. So I guess, I mean, it was really a case of feeling like I had to have one or two friends guesting on the album, regardless. And then once you do that, you then start thinking, well, I can't have him without having him, because then he'd be offended, and he's as good a friend, and he's stuck by me just as much. And that shit grows, and in the end, the album was dominated by so many musicians, which was great, because it marked the end of a bad period and the beginning of a good one.
Yeah, for a start.
Exactly.
Now, you've spent significant portions of your life in the US and in the UK. Which do you consider home?
I don't know. The one thing about a tour in life is you pretty much figure that the people are pretty much the same wherever you go. Whether they're rich, whether they're poor, whether they come from an educated culture, or whether they come from tribes in the deepest, darkest of Africa. People intrinsically are pretty much the same, and they want the same things. And I guess, I mean, I kind of blank out all the other stuff beyond the basic people thing. But I kind of feel comfortable just about anywhere, so I couldn't really say. I mean, there's so much that the US that I have in common with the US because of that musical history and that competitive environment. But then at the same time, there's all that weird, quirky British stuff that I miss when I'm away from the UK. The whole ethos that gives birth to why the British are kind of crazy and eccentric, and where that Monty Python kind of weird head comes from, which a lot of cats in the States can't understand. I found actually recently that Australia is the one place on the planet where you guys understand that thing entirely.
For sure. Yeah.
Aussies and the British are the only people who share the same sense of humour, except the Aussies just make it a bit dirtier.
What about in terms of blues bands and blues performers? Is there a distinguishing feature that separates American blues bands and artists to the English?
I guess nowadays it's quality. I'd hate to say, it sounds like a real pompous thing to say, but unfortunately, I guess, I mean, the UK gave birth to such a huge degree of talent through the 60s and the 70s. And then for some reason, I mean, the business became, from the late 70s through the early 80s on, the business was pretty much taken over entirely by lawyers and accountants who made all the decisions, creative decisions based on balance sheets rather than anything else. It's almost like, I don't know, the British music scene, it lost its benchmarks, and it sat on its laurels for some time. Without those benchmarks, without the artistic competitiveness, there's been a dearth of sort of second-rate British blues bands that play in every single bar around the country that epitomise what the average member of the public thinks is blues, which is kind of the same headbanging, trying to copy, the Eric Clapton 60s thing, the blues rock thing from the 60s, and never really delving back into the real roots of where the thing comes from. And yet you look at the States, and that's never changed. That competitiveness has never changed, and you've got your different styles, the Chicago thing, and the West Coast thing, and the Texas thing, but they're all still firmly entrenched in the roots. Many American rock performers and blues rock crossover performers have been influenced by the British 60s blues boom, but they never based the whole musical culture on that. And most British blues musicians, unfortunately, don't listen to much more than Eric Clapton and that 60s thing. I just don't think that gives you enough in the way of background to really express the music the way it's meant to be expressed. So there's a lack of quality over here on the whole in Britain, which has been a bit of a shame. But America kind of, musicians have their ups and downs, but the quality's always been there at a grassroots level. Your average bar in the States, you're going to find the quality of your average blues band that just plays around the local town a hell of a lot better than what you'd find in Europe for that reason. Which is kind of sad. I mean, there are some great British blues acts out there on the scene, but they comprise a minority of the whole of British blues musicians, if you know what I mean.
A new album in the works you're in the process of putting together now. What can you tell us about it so far?
Yeah, Regal Touch. It's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of an extension of the influences that I've not yet really been putting into my blues in a recording sense over the years. I mean, for the last couple of years on the road, I've kind of come out myself a little bit more and been bringing out other influences into what I do. We've been having a really good time on the road with it, and yet I've not really recorded anything that represents that side of me. I guess there's like bringing out more of the stacks element of songwriting into the music. I don't know, some people say it's kind of like almost a cross between the blues meets like something like Southside Johnny and the Aspie Jukes or something.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which the two go hand in glove together really, really well. And I feel real comfortable in that place at the moment because it allows me to lyrically explore myself just a little bit more when I'm writing and not have to succumb to convention to too big a degree. So yeah, I'm getting all of that out of me right now. There's one cover I'm doing on the album, which is a version of the Old Faces tune "Stay With Me."
All right.
Which I got Ron Wood guesting on guitar on. That's going to be like maybe the one guest, one out of maybe two guests on the album, the maximum. And the rest of it's pretty much my trip, and we'll see whether the wider record buying market kind of think along the same way as me.
So we're not going down that special guest list path again. It's more of a band.
Yeah, no, this is me and the touring band, just live and raucous in the studio the way that we do it on stage, and really getting some of these songs that have become anthems with some of the fans at a lot of the shows in Europe, getting them finally recorded so people can actually take that stuff home from a show and listen to it. I mean, I hope and I trust that certainly all my friends in Australia will enjoy the album. I've got a funny feeling they will.
It sounds like the material on it is all pretty well road tested already. That's important for you?
Yeah, I guess, because I lost a lot of confidence during that period of time when I was away. And in many respects, the last album and getting out on the road again, and it was kind of like having to build back the whole confidence in what you're about and your abilities. And it's always that feedback from the crowds that maintains and builds that confidence for you. You know, they support you and help you grow. And I guess the bottom line is to do something that's stylistically slightly different on a record from what you're known for doing, because I've always been, certainly in the UK, put more into the traditional bracket of a horn-led band that's kind of doing things, that T-Bone Walker meets modern, meets early Ronnie Earl kind of vibe, which is well and good, but to make a real stylistic move, I mean, I really needed some feedback from someone, and best feedback you can ever get from a crowd.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You mess up or you show fear in your eyes for 1 second, and the crowd will always know.
So what's the anticipated release of that one?
We're looking at a release for, I guess, around springtime next year. I mean, there's currently some businesses having to be sorted out on the back of this, because we're looking at a slightly a bigger marketing push than I guess what I've had so far happen in the past, or what most blues musicians get. So we're like, we're having to do a video for one of the songs and stuff like that. I mean, that's all currently been scheduled right here and now. I would like to see it out in the spring, but unfortunately the powers that be always have the last say over this kind of thing.
What about your songwriting, Todd? Is there a comfortable routine or procedure that you've settled into now for that?
I don't know. I've got many friends who've always followed the idea that a muse suddenly comes and hits you, and it hangs around for a while, and you write a bunch of great shit, and then it goes, and then you're sat there waiting for it to happen again for a few years, which I don't really believe in. I mean, this is something that Paul Weller has said for a long time, and hence that's how he explains the path of the ups and downs of his career. I'm convinced really that once you got the buzz, just a bit of hard work and a routine where you don't allow it to go. You don't back off for a second, and you just keep writing every day, and you create that routine, and you keep that buzz happening for a long time. I tend to find that it's easier now that I've got small kids at home. It's easier for me to write really when I'm on the road, which is a good incentive to keep me on the road as much as possible. I guess most of this new album has been written on the back of a sick bag in a plane.
Yeah. And just for our listeners here, what is the makeup of your band these days?
It's a 6-piece. I carry a 2-piece horn section, tenor and trumpet, bass, drums, keyboards, and myself. Which, once again, I mean, the logistics of taking be it a small horn section out on the road, most bands veer away from it because it costs too much money.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Which is kind of cool for me because money's less the issue, and I'm happier doing something or providing a service that not that many people are providing anymore. And it always sets us apart at festival bills. I've always enjoyed the lift that horns give stuff. I wish more people carried section. It used to be a big, I guess, the background of what was Texan blues for most of its history. And unfortunately, this world of accountants and lawyers and balance sheets has just stopped musicians from being able to do what they really want to do.
Well, thanks a lot, Todd. It's been great catching up with you. Best of luck with the new album, and we're certainly glad there's not going to be such a huge gap between albums this time around.
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, I'm running out of space for the songs I want to do on this one, so I'm already planning the one after.
Oh, fantastic. Well, we'll be looking out for that, and hopefully you can follow it up with a visit down here. We'd love to see you.
Oh, absolutely. I want to be getting back to Oz as soon as possible, and that's also something that's been set up now for next year. So hopefully, my few Australian fans will get to see me at some point soon.
We'll be there. No worries. Thanks a lot, Todd.
No problem.
Thanks for your time. Take care.
Bye now.
Bye.